Build back bigger. That's the motto of the rich man in Jesus' parable, right? Enough is not enough. Wealth even is not enough. I need more, and space to hold it, right? Sometimes it's tough to connect the dots between the world of the first century in Israel and 21st century America. And this is not one of those times, right? In fact, it might be a little too easy to draw the lines from the text to the present. Villainous, uber wealthy people exerting control over the economy, hoarding for themselves, building bigger and bigger to accommodate the more and more they accumulate, right? We could read this story while sipping coffee from our Elizabeth Warren Billionaire Tears mugs and feel pretty good about ourselves, right? Knowing that those rich jerks will get what's coming to them. All right. Some of you will take this story in a completely different direction when you hear those words, one that is driven by the guilt and shame that's been ingrained into you so deeply from childhood and which guides your reading of Scripture to this day. You'll wonder if your retirement account puts you in the rich man's camp. You'll wonder if you're wrong for demanding justice in an ongoing family battle regarding a loved one's will and wishes. Such a common story. Maybe you go back and forth like me between the smugness and the guilt when you hear this story. Might I suggest that these may not be the most helpful lenses for our own Christian formation and discipleship? All right, so what is then? Let me back up a little into the text before this one. Jesus has just come from a very uncomfortable dinner with some religious leaders, a dinner in which he calls them greedy and wicked and compares them to dirty dishes and unmarked graves. I don't know, but I'm guessing he didn't make it to the main course here. He leaves the confrontation, leaves the dinner early, and continues to be hounded by the Pharisees and scribes. But he can't get away because a huge crowd has gathered outside, thousands, Luke tells us. They were on top of each other trying to get close to him, to hear him. So Jesus takes the opportunity to insult the religious leaders publicly, not just at the dinner, but publicly, calling them hypocrites and telling the crowd not to be afraid of those guys, right? Jesus is in a moment of public conflict here. He makes his case against those who have it out for him, and he tells the crowd, basically, if you're on my team, you're on God's team, and the Holy Spirit will be with you even when these jokers over here come after you. Okay, I'm heavily paraphrasing here, but you can go back and read it, and you'll get the gist. Jesus is hangry, y'all. He's not messing around. And some guy in the crowd pipes up out of nowhere with a financial dispute. Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. Read the room, man. Is it bad to want your inheritance? No. Is a family dispute a totally normal thing to ask a respected rabbi about? Yes, actually. But there's a time and a place, and this is not it, bruh, all right? Jesus doesn't do what the man asks, but he uses his request to springboard into what he really wants to talk about. This is something preachers and politicians are notorious for, I know. But we're in good company. Jesus does it too. Be on your guard, Jesus says. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. He gives some side eye to the Pharisees, I imagine. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Jesus tells a pretty straightforward story to make his point. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. Now notice, it's the land that produced, right? Not the rich man. The harvest was so stellar, so unexpectedly bountiful, that the rich man didn't know what to do with it all. He asked himself, what should I do? There's more produce than I have room to store. I know. I will tear down my perfectly good barns and build back bigger. I'll store all my grains and all my stuff, and I will say to myself, self, you're set for life. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. He's confident that all his days are now secure. Too bad this is his last one. You fool, God taunts him. A lot of good this abundant crop is doing you now. Again, heavily paraphrased. Who is going to benefit from all of this now? It's a really interesting question, I think, if we can get past the guilt or the smugness to this question, right? Because until this very moment, the rich man hasn't shown any evidence of thinking of anyone but himself. He's literally talking to himself and imagining future conversations with himself in the text. No family are consulted, no neighbors taken into account. Did his hoarding drive up prices for the community? Maybe. Were there some around him whose land produced little and who had lots of space open in their barns? There's no mention of gratitude, of course, to God or to the land. The rich man spends his final days building storage for a life that he doesn't get to live. And when he dies, he has no power over what happens to the treasure he has so carefully and gleefully preserved. Will it rot in the barns? Will his enemies come in the night and take it? Will his poor neighbors divvy it up in a joyful jubilee? We don't know. So it is with those who store up treasure for themselves but are not rich toward God. Jesus concludes. I feel bad for the nameless man who asked the question. It's a mercy that the gospel doesn't record his name. He'd rather remain anonymous, I'm sure. But maybe his request for Jesus' help arbitrating this family dispute was rooted in greed. We don't know. Maybe it was rooted in a desire for justice and fairness. Maybe his older brother was hoarding the family land and possessions for himself. Perhaps when Jesus tells him to be on his guard against greed, when he tells the story about the rich farmer, he's telling the man to watch out for his brother's greedy ways, to choose a different way of living, a different set of priorities. Sometimes justice isn't about getting what you are due in a broken system. Sometimes justice is about leaving the system altogether, right? And Jesus isn't going to mediate a dispute about land ownership and wealth when his invitation to disciples is to leave all that behind and follow him on the road, literally, anyway. All right. So what about us? We're not all vagabonds traveling with a physically present Jesus. Is it bad to save money? Is it wrong to ask for what is rightfully yours? Should we somehow detach ourselves from the material realm? Of course not. Jesus cares about your material and bodily well-being. Right after this parable, Jesus assures his hearers of this, saying God knows their needs for food and clothing, and even things like beauty. And God will provide these just like God provides for the birds and the flowers. It's not that your material needs are bad. It's that your life is about more than that. More. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? You are not worth less. You are worth more than all of your material needs. So don't forget that. Excuse me. You okay? Excuse me. The mic is in an unfortunate position for that cough. Apologies. So, if we're not going to read this from a place of guilt, and if we're not going to read this from a place of pointing the finger and relishing in the rich man's demise, or at least not just that, then how do we read it? What can this story be inviting us to consider? How can it shape us as Jesus' disciples now? Or should we just pass by it uncomfortably like we usually do? One question we might ask ourselves is, where do we find our security? Where do we find our security? In houses or buildings or bank accounts, in influence or authority or office space? Where do we find our security? And is that really where it lies? If not, if those things can be taken away or lost, as we know that they can, then where do we find our firm footing? Perhaps even more than his riches, the thing that the parable draws attention to about the rich man is his isolation. The choices he makes, the conversations he has in his head are made completely alone. Read it again and see how many times you see the words I, me, my, self. The NRSV uses soul, but really he's saying self. What will I do? The man's decisions are made in isolation from the love of God and the love of neighbor. Now, we don't all have land that is producing abundantly. I don't know, anybody farmer in here? Maybe a few folks, yeah? But what do you have in abundance? What gifts has God and the world given you? What skills, influence, finances, time, ability? What capacity to love? What passions, what gifts do you have an abundance of? Yeah. Instead of hoarding them and finding our security in them, like the man in the parable, how can we turn those things outward for the good of our neighbors and of ourselves as well? It's like the cookies. If you eat them all, it's not good for you either, right? So it's a great example. Whatever you have in abundance may not be literal crops from the land like the rich man, but I bet if you think for just a minute, you will realize that your passion, your skills, who you are at your core is rooted in something that's much bigger than you. It's not all on your own. None of us have pulled our bootstraps up by ourselves, right? Whatever gifts we have come from a much bigger system that's at work, and a lot of times that system is an unjust one. All the more reason, right, to reorient our understanding of abundance. Not as our right or our security, but as our opportunity to partner with God and neighbor in building the kingdom of God. Justice and abundance for all and for the earth as well. That's where we can find security. Because, excuse me, at the end of our lives, it won't matter how big our metaphorical barns are, right? You won't be reflecting on your life asking yourself how much you've saved or how talented you were or how high you climbed on the ladder of success. At the end of your life, you'll ask yourself something like, did my life help create a more generous world? Did my love and care enrich the lives of those around me? I think the invitation for us from this story today is not one of guilt or shame, and it's not one we can pass on and duck out of either. The invitation is to reevaluate our lives, to take a look at what we are doing with what we have, where we are finding or striving for security, and to reorient ourselves. This is a good chance to reorient ourselves. Are we alone, stagnant with our things, building up walls of protection that we know aren't really going to protect us? It's a scary world that we live in, and no one can blame you for this tendency. But Jesus invites us to loosen our grip, to look outward to our neighbor, to look outward to God's movement in the world, to approach our lives with gratitude and not scarcity. This is important for us to think about as individuals. It's important for us to think about as a church, too. How will we do God's will with what our land has produced for us, right? How will we imaginatively and boldly turn our abundance outward and upward, not just as imagined security for our own future, but as a gift and life and opportunity to partner with God in our community here. Lots for us to think about together in the coming days. But beloveds, what things do you put your trust in? They're not there to hold you up. When tested, they will not hold you up. But they are tools that you are entrusted to hold. They won't hold you, but you can hold them and share and use and look outward wildly with an eye to God's kingdom, the only place that our true hope and security can be found. So may we wield the gifts of God, the gifts of the land, wisely, with compassion, with generosity, and with love. Thanks be to God. Amen.